This is Renewing Faith Radio with Pastor Jason Gold of Regeneration Calvary Chapel in Sandpoint, Idaho.
In your presence, darkness hides.
Daniel and the boys are part of the wise guys. Remember, these were the counselors that Nebuchadnezzar had captured from Jerusalem, some 10,000 young men. And so God is setting this all up, and God is working here. And that should encourage us today, that when things just seem so desperate, things seem so out of control, things seem so dark and evil, God is in the working business of his plans and his purposes.
God is bigger than any obstacle you face, and he's present in the past, present, and future at the same time. He can orchestrate your life in a way that's impossible to grasp from our limited, time-constrained minds. As Pastor Jason continues our study of the book of Daniel today, we'll see the way God was working behind the scenes to put Daniel exactly where he wanted him. He had a plan that Daniel couldn't have known or understood, but he trusted God and was used greatly for his purpose. Now turn in your Bible to the book of Daniel, chapter 2, as Pastor Jason begins his message, Trusting God When Things Seem Impossible.
What do you do in impossible situations? When things are just presented to you as if there's absolutely no way to accomplish whatever needs to be accomplished. There's no way to, in your own human efforts, to get the job done. And that is really what happens in our text with Daniel, is they are confronted with an impossible situation. So picking it up here in Daniel chapter 2, verse 1, it says, Now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, Nebuchadnezzar had dreams. So he had multiple dreams, or it could have been the same dream over and over again. We don't know for certain, but Daniel's interpretation is very specific, and he's not interpreting multiple dreams. So it could be the same dream multiple times. And it goes on to say, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Now, when it says that, now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign, we learn that Daniel and the wise, young, handsome young men, that they were put into training for, does anybody remember how long? 3 years. And so here it says that now in the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign. And so there's some interpretation here that needs to take place. And it's at times difficult to understand the timing when things are alluded to within the text. You know, he was supposed to be trained up for 3 years. Now he's in the second year of his reign. And some commentators say that this happened when Daniel was during the 3-year training course. And then others say it was after he had finished the training course. But the ancient Babylonians spoke of the beginning and the end of the reign of the king in a way that often overlapped years. So they would speak of a year within a partial year. It wasn't a full calendar year. Therefore, the year 602 BC could be both the second year of Nebuchadnezzar's reign and after the 3-year training of these young youth that had been captured out of Jerusalem. And so just going into that, because some people say, there's a contradiction, and it usually, not usually, always, when somebody says there's a contradiction, there's an explanation. And it's important for us to understand that. So here where it says, and his spirit, so he got this dream, and his spirit was so troubled that his sleep left him. Nebuchadnezzar is the most powerful, richest man on the planet right now, and he's losing sleep. Money can't buy us rest. Money can't buy us sleep. And the truth of it is, Nebi being the most powerful man, he's dealing with a whole lot of his own internal struggles. Because when you think of somebody being the most powerful person on the planet, people are inherently an ambitious people. We have vision, we have desires, there's things that we want to do in life. And so we set those things before us. We have goals, right? But when you are the most powerful, richest man on the planet, what's left? There's probably a bunch of emptiness, a bunch of self-reflection. And so Nebuchadnezzar's reign lasted for 70 years, or Babylon, rather, lasted for 70 years, which is not a long time. United States, 200-ish years. Empires grow and empires fall. And it's interesting is that some of the most wealthiest people in our world today are some of the most drug-addicted, alcohol-addicted, troubled people on the planet because they strive for everything monetarily, and when they obtain it, they realize there's still a void because God's not the center of it. And so when people obtain status, money, whatever, there's always, well, what's next? What else can I do? And we have to guard ourselves with this. When you think of Peter and his ministry, when the beggar outside of the city gates was begging for food, begging, he needed money. Peter in his ministry wanted to give him the most valuable thing that he could on the planet. And this is what he said. Then Peter said, "Silver and gold I do not have, but what I do have I give you. In the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, rise up and walk." He said, I don't have anything monetarily to give you, but who I do, or what I do have to give you, his name is Jesus. You're going to find all of your purpose. You're going to find all of your value. You're going to find all of your ambition in Jesus. There's nothing more radical than living your life for Jesus. Setting goals for Jesus, doing the things that he's called you to do, doing the things that he's put on your heart are going to get you out of your comfort zones. And the church, the overall church, the church is, in essence, part of the church has fallen asleep. Actually, I heard the statistic just a week ago that it's actually 4% of the people in the church do 100% of the work. There's something wrong with that. We should be looking for opportunities to serve. We should be looking for opportunities to serve the body of Christ. And here we are with Peter giving this beggar the most valuable thing on the planet, and that is where salvation is found. And we're going to see Daniel. Daniel is so God-focused in the midst of an impossibility. Verse 2, it says, Then the king gave the command to call the magicians, the astrologers, the sorcerers, and the Chaldeans to tell the king his dreams. So they came and stood before the king. So from Nebuchadnezzar's perspective, he's calling in all the wisest counsel that he has inherited from his dad. And it's interesting, he says that this is a list of the wisest men that Nebuchadnezzar has surrounded himself with. So let's define some of this. So he commanded that he called the magicians, and the magicians were the sacred scribes. They were highly educated. They were of the elite. When you would see them, you would notice them. They would walk differently. They would talk differently. They taught things that no one knew. Little insights that unless you heard it from them, no one would ever know it. And sometimes people guru-ize people, and then all of a sudden it's like, I gotta go to this person because whatever they say, that's what I'm supposed to do. And that's kind of what the magicians were like. Then the astrologers, these were the ones that did like secret spells. They would tell mysteries. The English word is not referring to like the stargazers where they're looking to the stars. No, these were the hocus pocus people. The sorcerers were the ones who were actually like the witch doctors. They were the witches, And ancient Babylon, it had its sorcery. And in all cultures in our world today, there's witchcraft. I don't know if you know this, but here in Sandpoint, there is a whole community of witches. In the last parade that we had in downtown, they had a banner, they wore their witch hats, and some of them had a broom, kind of putting it in the community's face that, hey, I'm here. Very demonic. And these are the people that Nebuchadnezzar is calling upon. And so the New Age movement is nothing new. It went on in ancient Babylon. And then the Chaldeans, these were like the priests. They were like running things. In verse 27, it says that the soothsayers were the astrologers. Here in verse 3, it says, "And the king said to them, I have had a dream, and my spirit is anxious to know the dream." Have you ever had a dream and you wake up and you're like out of breath, or your heart is pounding, you prop up, or there's different reactions to a dream? Well, nonetheless, he is troubled. He's anxious about this dream. Verse 4, it says, "Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic." So the book of Daniel is written in two languages. It's written in Hebrew and Aramaic. When it's written in Aramaic, it's to the Gentile world. And it's written from this point here in verse 4 through chapter 7. So from chapter 2, verse 4 through chapter 7, which is really interesting because in the Aramaic, in this portion, it is the history of the world prophesied to the entire world. And then after chapter 7, there's more emphasis on Israel and the future of Israel, so then it switches to Hebrew. So if a non-Jew were to pick up the book of Daniel, they would be able to see their future explained in chapter 2, verse 4 through chapter 7. God is in control. He's sovereign. He knows what he's doing. Praise the Lord, right? Now, verse 4, it says, "Then the Chaldeans spoke to the king in Aramaic, 'O king, live forever.'" So that right there, the "O king, live forever" is the first Aramaic there introduced in Daniel. "Tell your servants the dream, and we will give the interpretation." In other words, tell us the dream. Hey, we'll make something up. We'll figure it out. Verse 5, it says, "The king answered and said to the Chaldeans," this is like, gets heavier, "My decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me and its interpretation, you shall be cut in pieces, and your house shall be made a ash heap." King James says dung heap. It actually means a house of ruins, just desolated. And so where it says to cut in pieces, it's referring to the ancient processes of what they would do is they would tie the criminal or whoever they're going to execute to 4 trees and then tighten it and then pull them apart. Kind of brutal. And they knew this. So you might think, this is a bit extreme. But don't people go to extreme measures when they've lost sleep? How do you do when you haven't slept for a period of time, maybe for days? We're not coherent. We're not making our wisest, best decisions. And the interesting thing here is whatever Nebuchadnezzar says is law. So there's no one to say, "Oh, no, you can't do that." If he says it, that's what's going to take place. And so when we follow God and his ways, so Nebuchadnezzar is doing everything. He's the most powerful man on the planet, and he has everything monetarily that anyone could desire. It's kind of like, hey, I got the new house, and I got the new moat. I got an improved moat, and I got the latest and greatest raft to go around the moat, and I got the latest and greatest walls. You should see my chariot. It's amazing. I have a harem, and that's complicated, but he's still not satisfied. He's not sleeping well. But when you and I follow God in his ways, we're given peace. We're given rest. Proverbs 3:24 says, "When you lie down, you will not be afraid. Yes, you will lie down and your sleep will be sweet. That means no bad breath. Just kidding. That'd be amazing, huh? You wake up and your spouse's face is right there, just going, and you're like, that was from the Lord. You slept good, didn't you? So anyway, that's not what that means. I don't want to be misunderstood. So here, Nebi, in his troubles, he says, look, you need to tell me the dream that I had. You need to tell me what it means, or I'm going to slice you and dice you. That'd be a bit intimidating, a bit daunting, and then your house will be ruined. So your body will be an hors d'oeuvre to the mount of ruins on your home. Pretty graphic, but Nebuchadnezzar, you get a sense that he's saying, I don't trust you guys. Because why would you put out such a creed against all of his wise guys? Remember, he inherited these wise guys from his dad. Now, verse 6, it says, however, he promises the world, kind of. It says, if you tell the dream and its interpretation, you shall receive from me gifts, rewards, and great honor. Therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. So you can imagine the gifts, you can imagine the rewards, you can imagine the honor coming from the most powerful, richest man on the planet. Very influential. So then he says, therefore, tell me the dream and its interpretation. They answered again and said, let the king tell his servants the dream, and we will give its interpretation. So the negotiation's going here. And the king answered and said, I know for certain that you would gain time because you see that my decision is firm. If you do not make known the dream to me, there's only one decree for you. For you have agreed to speak lying and corrupt words before me till the time has changed. Therefore, tell me that this is like, hey, this is your last hurrah. Otherwise, you're dead meat. Therefore, tell me the dream, and I shall know that you can give me its interpretation. Really interesting. Tell me my dream and tell me what it means. I'm not going to give you a clue. And you know how the kids are when you say, hey, I know something that you don't. Okay, give me a clue, give me a clue. Well, Nebi, he's not giving them any clues. He's just like, you're doomed if you don't work this out. Now, Nebuchadnezzar, he was a pagan king. So he's surrounded with pagan counsel. And this is just how he did things. Nabopolassar was his dad. And again, this is the people, the wise guys that he had inherited. So it was his practice to call upon the witch doctors and such. Now, Ezekiel, he wrote about this, the prophet Ezekiel. He said in chapter 21, verse 21, says, for the king of Babylon stands at the parting of the road, at the fork of the two roads, to use divination. He shakes the arrows. He consults the images. He looks at the liver, the sacrifices, and all this pagan ritual. So Nebuchadnezzar, he is not right in his head spiritually. And it's as if he's wondering if these soothsayers and wise people have been lying to him throughout the years. Because he's playing hardball now, and he wants to know if their claims of supernatural wisdom are true. And now verse 10, it says, the Chaldeans answered the king and said, there is not a man on earth who can tell the king's matters. Therefore, no king, lord, or ruler has ever asked such things of any magician, astrologer, or Chaldean. So here we see this confession of inability to be able to perform to the king's needs. And it's interesting is that this is a setup. This is where God's sovereignty comes in. This is a setup for God to use Daniel. The Chaldeans are saying, nobody can do this. And God's saying, aha, there's someone that can. And so God is always grooming his purposes and his plan, even in the darkest times, because Daniel and the boys are part of the wise guys. Remember, these were the counselors that Nebuchadnezzar had captured from Jerusalem, some 10,000 young men. And so God is setting this all up And God is working here. And that should encourage us today that when things just seem so desperate, things seem so out of control, things seem so dark and evil, God is in the working business of his plans and his purposes. Verse 11, it says, "It is a difficult thing that the king requests, and there is no other who can tell it to the king except the gods, whose dwelling is not with flesh." So once again, here we see this setup for Daniel. Now, the Chaldeans say that no one can do this but the gods that are not of the flesh. But what they don't understand is that they're actually referring to Jehovah. They're referring to God Almighty. And so they're trying to ask Nebuchadnezzar to be reasonable, and because they're saying, look, what you're asking for is absolutely impossible. They're coming to grips with it. And so here, we'll go into verse 12. It says, "For this reason, the king was angry and very furious." So when the king, the guy that's most powerful, most influential, is not only angry, but he's furious, that's not a good thing. And gave the command to destroy all the wise men in Babylon. So he's troubled from his dream. He's now, seems like he's ticked off at these guys. He's angry, he's furious, and he just deploys the execution. He says, "Go after them." Verse 13, it says, "So the decree went out, and they began killing the wise men, and they sought Daniel and his companions to kill them." So apparently Daniel and his friends, they weren't here during this whole process. It could be that they're young counselors. They're of the junior category of rank. Verse 14 says, "Then with counsel and wisdom." Remember, this is Daniel responding. And it says that with counsel, he sought counsel and wisdom. And we're told at the end of chapter 1 that he was gifted with this wisdom. So he's seeking counsel. He has this God-given wisdom. And Daniel answered Arioch, a captain of the king's guard, who had gone out to kill the wise men of Babylon. So Daniel is careful how he responds here to the executioner. Sometimes we don't make the best decisions or responses in intense situations. When we're provoked, when we feel the fight or flight, we feel like our back is against the wall. Sometimes we lash out in the flesh. Sometimes we puff out our chest. Well, Daniel's not doing that. He's wise. And this gives us an idea that any time that even in a horrible situation where Daniel's life is on the line here, he's part of the decree to be murdered, executed, and Daniel responds wisely. But there's some classic responses that aren't so wise. One of the classic responses that are in the Bible is when Moses came down from Mount Sinai and he saw Aaron and the people worshiping to a golden calf. And so Moses confronts Aaron. And he's like, what in the world are you doing? And Exodus 32:24, it says, "And I said to them, whoever has any gold, let them break it off. So they gave it to me, and I cast it into the fire, and this calf came out." That's pretty dumb, right? And here Daniel is, he's 18, and he knows better than to make something up. He's just not responding in a way of, okay, I'm in a difficult situation, so I'm just going to talk my way out of this. That's not what he's doing.
You've just heard a verse-by-verse teaching from the book of Daniel with Pastor Jason Gold on Renewing Faith Radio. One of the greatest lessons in Daniel is the importance of humility before God. Whether it was Nebuchadnezzar being humbled after his prideful boasting, or Daniel himself acknowledging that all wisdom comes from the Lord, this book reminds us that God exalts the humble and brings down the proud. True strength isn't found in status or power, but in surrendering to God's authority. Have you placed your trust in Him, recognizing that all you have is from His hand? If you'd like to learn more about how to live with humility before God, or have questions about today's message, please call us at 208-557-WORD. That's 208-557-9673. We'd love to hear from you, pray for you, and connect with you. To hear this message again or to listen to others, visit us at renewingfaithradio.com. Don't forget to download our mobile app, available on the Apple and Google Play app stores, so you can listen on the go. Renewing Faith Radio is the broadcast ministry of Regeneration Calvary Chapel in Sandpoint, Idaho. If you're nearby, we'd love for you to join us this weekend. We have Sunday services at 8:30 and 10:30 a.m., as well as a midweek service on Wednesday at 6:30 p.m. You can find directions and more information on our website, renewingfaithradio.com. Thanks for tuning in today to Renewing Faith Radio.